Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Frontline Advantage. I'm so excited today for our special guest, Wilbur Bill Harmon, who maybe I could call a friend now, but has been a mentor and someone we've looked up to and talked to over the years about what we've been doing. Bill and I got introduced several years ago by a mutual friend. He is formerly the VP of HR at ANSYS, a publicly traded company worth around $25 billion today. Bill also has his own consulting firm and is now the managing director and head at Promark Consulting, which he can tell you more about. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, Vivek. How are you, my friend?
Doing well, thank you. Bill, why don't you start about telling us all a little bit about your background before we dive in?
Okay. Well, as you mentioned earlier, I kind of worked the ranks on the people side of the world, on the business side. Eventually joining a software company, engineering software company of ANSYS, as you mentioned, becoming its vice president of human resources, global human resources, and enjoyed the opportunity traveling around the world and really trying to, as we built this little company into something very significant, how do we retain the best talent? How do we attract the best talent? And really put it in a position to be successful. What were the resources that were needed? And what was the data that was going to be necessary for us to pull that off long before data such as what you were putting in place was even available? So that was a fun challenge, enjoyed it a great deal. Had an opportunity to move on to Promark Company, the firm that I'm the CEO and managing partner for. And enjoying, again, the opportunity to grow that, again, staying in the people side of really what's referred to as the human capital market. Human capital market has, the technology aspects, the side you're playing in, and then there's the people consulting side of it, the side I'm playing in. Both sides need each other, and so that's always been a fun dynamic to partner with various organizations, some of which have got great technology, but how to the practical application of it within an organization. Those kind of things are fun challenges. And how do you make sure you don't overload your people with too much technology that they, stop being effective in their jobs? And so that's that balance. And I've always enjoyed what you and your teams have been able to pull off to help clients get the data they need, be able to make actionable, efforts associated with it. That's the key part.
That's great. And so tell us a little bit about when you were at ANSYS, what it looked like in terms of how you captured data for the world.
From a data perspective, at that time, we were dependent upon third-party consulting groups, all right, who was able to provide us information on the growth. There wasn't a great deal of platforms, if you want to call it, available that we could count on. There were a lot of enterprise-wide software systems. Oracle at that time, SAP, were big players, but frankly, they were taking a look at everything from the finance side of things predominantly, some dabbling on the operational side of things, but very little on the people side. And so one of the reasons I'm excited about the various applications that are available out there to provide data, such as what you're providing to the market, they just weren't tools that existed 15 years ago. And yet, a lot of companies will always say the most important asset is people. They really didn't have a lot of insight other than anecdotal. I hate to say it. There is a running joke out there about, the difference between wandering around by management and management by wandering around. All right. The former is not a good thing. If management's just wandering around, that's not very good. But if they are, however, out there with a purpose, trying to find data, that was the way you had to do it. You had to, you really didn't get a chance to analyze patterns. You didn't get a lot of feedback unless you personally sought it out. And so that's why I enjoy to see the development of the technology that essentially puts it at my fingertips now to have that insight. And then I can go out and validate. And that was the same premise we had at ANSYS as a software company. You can analyze it first and then go out and validate it. And that's a nice addition to today's workplace. You can find out where real centers of influence are in the organization, how to communicate best with those, get ahead of your issues versus constantly having to react. That was our biggest issue, to try and get in front of issues. before they became really significant show-stopping issues. And so just there's a part of me, I've joked with you, I wish I had the tools you were inventing in my heyday as an operational HR leader. Now we just get the opportunity to refer people to some of the great tools that are out there and why they want to have it. And that part we enjoy.
We have so many metrics around operational efficiency, or in the case you're talking about software and all of that. When we think about our people, we're relying on anecdotes. We're relying on consultants and reviews online after the fact, rather than looking at it quantitatively and really saying, hey, we're relying on data to make these business decisions. So that's really fascinating. I remember some of our conversations, some of the quotes, you're sort of saying to me like, hey, take care of your people or someone else will. And so when we think about this data aspect, you've also talked to me about your specialty at Promark being on the people side. How do we take these insights and help organizations and people be set up for success based on actually capturing the feedback and from the ground level, from what employees are actually saying and seeing and doing with what they're, in their day-to-day?
Well, let's talk about even on a macro level, if you don't mind for a second. We hear a great deal about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The bottom element of DE&I work is that people want to be heard. That's the code, regardless of the label you put on it. And there's no judgment on that pro or con. All right. Organizations are investing a great deal of money trying to help people in the belonging aspect of DE&I to be heard. And the more that, that information can be democratized, where more people are getting versus just connected individuals or those who've got the ears of others, this is probably the purest form of really gathering information from those who might not have the opportunity to provide it. And if you think about it, it's one of the biggest concerns in organizations is what's called how thick is the filters. CEOs ask, and this has been throughout history, how much do they really know what's happening at production floor level or whatever the case may be? There's a host of applications. How far removed are they from the real information, and how many filters have been applied to what's really happening there to the time it gets to, frankly, decision makers? So, like I said, Teamforce, you provide that insights at a level that doesn't mean the CEO needs to be reading it, but they have now direct input. They have data available to them it's unprecedented for them to be able, as I said earlier, get in front of scenarios. So organizations who are just trying to hold it the old classic way of figuring out anecdotal, they're going to fall behind. They're going to constantly be reacting versus getting in front of situations. And one of the most aggressive firefighting groups in the whole world was the Chicago Fire Department, and people come from around the world to study Chicago Fire Department skills and capabilities. Something about having this tragic Great Chicago Fire might have a tendency to change how you do firefighting. But the key element that they always point out is not just their effectiveness at responding to a fire, which is what a lot of HR groups are doing and becoming better and better at. It's the effectiveness of fire prevention, the things that get in front of it beforehand, how aggressive they are in that area. And that's what's really studied, is that how do they get in front of the issues before they have to respond aggressively? And it's the same analogy on what you're offering. You're providing information that's absolutely critical for the attraction, retention, development, and growth of what really is the key asset that drives all organizations. And so, to a degree, I'm not going to put a firefighter cap on you, but you're providing fire protection as well as validation of if there really is a fire developing, maybe a better way of addressing it. So, the pandemic brought out a lot of need for this in particular because of its impacts on people on all fronts, life, professional, the whole show. And so that's the impressive part. You now have information that maybe would have been more challenging to get, in a fragmented kind of workplace. It's a little more difficult to get that information right now by doing that management by wandering around that I said earlier. And so you need to really have tools available to you at your fingertips that you can check on a daily basis on, what's the pulse, what's this really looking like. And that's what's been impressive about what you're putting together.
As you think about the S curve of product adoption, and we're sort of at the early part of that, we tend to get these organizations that see the future and that see the vision and are excited and are sort of saying, hey, shouldn't this be the norm? Like, this makes sense for our employees. This also makes business sense for us, because this data is to not only help us figure out what we need to do for our people, but it's to help us build a better organization. When you talk about some of these executives who, there's probably a group of them that are almost scared to actually execute on giving their people a voice for fear of exposing what the true reality is of their day-to-day culture, their comments about them as leaders. How do you think the evolution is going to evolve on a macro basis? Where, is this one of those things where, listen, Teamforce keeps growing and there are solutions that are going to be out there that companies are going to rely on to get this data and start acting? And if you are one of these companies that are more reactive today, you're going to hold out as long as you can, but inevitably you're going to fall behind unless you actually do something about it. And it's going to continue to cost you money. What does the future look like with this kind of thing?
Those who have grown, those who now really have been decisive. They've been able to make decisions by getting in front of issues in some cases, being very clear and they've been basing it off of data, not just anecdotal. There was no playbook written with the pandemic in mind. So we've seen a lot of things come out of it and that hopefully will survive. But one of the basic elements is you need to have the information. If you really truly are committed to wanting to understand how to make an organization better, you've got to get beyond the traditional pieces of just analyzing our finances, our cash flows, our operating efficiencies, and really invest in what's the information we need from our people and the input we need from our people, who in many cases, you belonging is one thing, but if you really talked about engagement, all right, if you really want them engaged, it's one thing to tell us how we're doing. All right, that's one form. The other is, what would you suggest? What other things, what other inputs do you have? Hey, we're thinking about, all the things that you provide in your platform, the custom aspects in which they can get information on initiatives that are even being considered. The downside of that is unknown. The upside is very clear. All right. We do a lot of work in talent attraction. Forget retention for a minute. Just what's it take to bring people to your organization? What's different and unique about your organization than any other organization that you compete against? And the blank stares that we will get sometimes, like, well, we're kind of we do the same as everybody else. We just pay a little better, or we have a little better PTO. Those aren't differentiators. All right. What is differentiators on why people come to a company is, what's a unique way? How well do I get along with my manager? How well is my input and experience being valued? Those intangibles companies have never really been able to have the answer for, and you're beginning to provide that. All right. That it really doesn't matter if you've been there 30 years or if you've been there 30 minutes. All right. Your platform provides them an opportunity to give input. It doesn't take away from management's right, or whatever you want to call that, responsibility, probably a better way of saying it, of making the decisions based upon the input. You just have so much more input to work with. Some organizations view people as a cost. Some view them as a risk. Now, what if you were actually able to view them as a true asset that gives you a competitive advantage in the marketplace? And what's it going to take to do that? And doing the same thing everybody else does, that's not going to get you there. Doing something that's unique and getting a little bit of a competitive advantage up front. Teamforce AI provides that, which is what I've liked about it. I would have loved to have had that data. I would have been able to run with it, would have had people that engaged with it, and would have gained confidence over time and engaging in it even more, particularly when they saw we were taking action from it. and could apply the actions this came as a result of. And so if I'm CEO of a major organization and I want to accomplish something different because my investors are all over me about that, all right, I'm going to turn to my HR person and I'm going to ask them, what do you got? And you don't want to be that deer in the headlights with no answer for your CEO or the board of directors on something else that you have available to give more input on people's success and ultimately company success.
You talk about these different spectrums, right? So on the one end, very candidly, there are prospects that'll talk to us about union avoidance, and they'll say, well, I could wait till my relations break down, and I've seen what's happened with some of these other big companies, or I could actually get ahead of it, and I can get all that data privately in real time while the people are still at the company, and I can at least acknowledge what people have said, even if we can't always react in the way they want, we at least have heard them. So it's like, if we don't build and bridge that gap between management and our people, then people are going to go around and figure out a way to get their voices heard. And
or go somewhere else.
If a company is hiring an employee experience manager, that is one of the best signs they're directionally moving in a direction where they care about how the entire experience is for their people, especially in the markets we think about, manufacturing, distribution, and healthcare. If they're not hiring for that role, it's a little bit harder of a sell because you're going to get all this data. And what are you going to do with the data? Even if you're forward thinking enough to say, we don't have budget for this role or we're not able to get management approval, it's a harder sell. And so we try to align ourselves as much as possible to these organizations that are starting to take those appropriate steps to make it successful for us once we come in too, because we come in, we provide all this data. Customers are like, oh my gosh, but if you've got someone dedicated, accountable, running this experience, it makes all the difference. I know we're running a little short on time, Bill, so I want to leave a little bit of time for you to share with the world and the audience. Tell us about Promark and all the good work you're doing nowadays, even beyond all this data collection that Team Force is very good at, and how we can even maybe work together, and some of the folks who listen to this podcast and can work with you.
Okay, so thanks for that. And you're right. I could go about 20 minutes on the whole people experience role as it's developing, an absolutely critical juncture of the HR field. Promark Company has been around since 1968. It's provided a variety of we'll call it people services. We use, if you can remember the old Got Milk dairy advertising, we use the Got People approach. If you've got people, you've got challenges, and we can help. And it's that simple mindset and the part that drives us. We have individuals that are very much into helping organizations achieve their goals with their people, through their people. All right. And that can tie in the entire talent life cycle from attraction of talent, all right, through partnerships with the acquisition of talent, through the development, retention, yes, executive coaching, teams, which became a very big part of our business particularly during the pandemic, as dysfunctionality set in, and as teams are more dynamic in their development and nature, how do you help them very quickly accelerate to become effective teams? Those components, as well as the overall broader kind of people HR consulting types of things. There's an awful lot of organizations that don't have access to the talent I have available to me in my firm. And so as a result, we can help bring that talent. They would never be able to afford, for instance, to be able to bring in a chief human resources officer. Yet we have those kind of players, formerly CHRO of Macy's Federated and other Smuckers and other great organizations that, have been in all of these industry spaces. And so, we like to sit down with our clients, find out what their goals are. We also provide some insight. We're a pretty candid organization, as you've learned over the years. We kind of call it as we see it, on what they would need to give some serious consideration on to be effective in these areas. So Promark Company is also an equity partner in an organization called Career Partners International, which essentially allows us to provide everything from outplacement services to executive coaching on a global basis. A good example, was recent engagements we've done in Hong Kong and Singapore, where we're doing executive coaching. We're doing some work in Australia. We're able to do those through our partners who, we are all equity partners with. We're part of this organization. It's not an association. It's not a collaboration. We all have built this global partnership to be one of the third largest consultancies in the world. And so as a result, we're able to provide our clients, regardless of whether they're a global titan or a local startup, and be able to scale our services appropriately for them. So we're seeing the light come on that the differentiator is your people and your talent. And that's the area that we help organizations really grow and develop. But you tapped on something called the People Experience Officer, all right, that's coming out. You're seeing that in the HR field right now. You're seeing the administrative aspects of HR. Some people traditionally called it personnel, the benefits, the compensation analysis, all that kind of, those elements there. That's traditional HR. And then you're now seeing this emerging very hot role of people experience. There really shouldn't be a people experience officer that doesn't use basically your technology and others, because they are about that aspect that we just talked about, optimizing your talent. The other half of it is about administering your talent and doing that effectively. Absolutely critical. Don't get me wrong. To be able to do those things effectively, they do help with engagement. But the people experience side, those individuals driving, you're going to see they're the ones that are going to eventually be at the big table. That's who the C-suite's going to want to interact with. The rest they're just going to view as something that needs to be done. So if you think of like in the essence of a CFO, all right, they're more than just accountants. All right. The CHRO is going to be much more than just a people manager or administrator. They've got to bring more to the table. So the emerging people experience officer is perfect for what you got on plate. That's what I'm kind of so excited about for you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're making a good distinction there. There's the experience side and there's the compliance side. Our goal isn't to get people fired and sort of to be this regulatory compliance tool of a he said, she said, and now we have a written repository with ticketing and documentation. That's all good. We have that.
Correct.
But that's not the way we go to market, and we think about how to actually excite customers and our broader audience and what we want to be known for. I mean, we have those capabilities, but we want to be known in the world of exactly what we talked about on here. People, your assets, you want to win as organizations. Rather than being reactive, be proactive and figure out ways you can, collectively work with your people, which are often your largest, cost center, in a way that ideally is an input. The way we eat food and provides us energy, the way, we invest in technologies that allow us to scale our lives. Having people ideally should allow organizations to actually excel even more if they have the right people and they train and retain and motivate and excite and all of that. So this is all music to my ears, Bill. I want to thank you for coming on today and the relationship we have. And I hope everyone enjoys this episode of the Frontline Advantage, and we'll see you next time.